Hello guys, welcome to my channel. In this video, we will discuss the hardships of Valley Forge and the resilience of the Continental Army. The winter wind cut through the trees like a knife, howling over the frozen encampment nestled in the Pennsylvania wilderness. Snow fell relentlessly, blanketing the landscape in cruel white silence. The soldiers of the Continental Army, many shoeless and clad in rags, huddled in hastily built log huts, each breath visible in the frigid air. Private Elijah Cartwright sat close to a small fire that barely crackled, his hands raw and blistered. The smoke stung his eyes, but he leaned into the heat anyway. The fire was life. The fire was hope. He pulled a threadbare woolen blanket tighter around his shoulders and looked at the pale faces around him. His fellow soldiers were not much older than he was. From farms in New Hampshire, blacksmiths from New York, tailors from Philadelphia. All had answered the call for liberty, and all were suffering. "We'll see spring yet," said James Talbot, Elijah's bunkmate, through chattering teeth. He tried to smile, but his cracked lips made it more of a grimace. "If the redcoats don't kill us, the cold will," muttered another soldier from across the room. His voice was hoarse, worn down by sickness and hunger. Elijah didn't respond. He knew better than to dwell on the darkness. Instead, he forced himself to remember the warm days of October before they'd marched into Valley Forge. Back then, spirits were high. General Washington's army had shown surprising mettle, fighting bravely despite being outmatched and outnumbered. But after defeats at Brandywine and Germantown, and with the British occupying Philadelphia, morale had begun to wane. And then came the order to make winter quarters at Valley Forge. No one knew what lay ahead. They built their own shelters with frozen hands and slept on straw or bare ground. Food was scarce, when it could be found at all. Elijah remembered gnawing on a piece of leather once, just to stave off the hunger. Disease was the greatest killer. Dysentery, typhoid, and smallpox crept through the camp like ghosts in the night. Each day, bodies were carried out, wrapped in rags or old blankets, buried in shallow graves. Still they stayed. General George Washington, tall and resolute, visited the huts often. He was not a distant figure, hidden in luxury. No, Washington shared in their hardships. Elijah had seen him ride by, cloak flapping in the wind, stopping to speak with soldiers, offering words of encouragement. "Hold fast," he had said once, his eyes meeting Elijah's. "We do not suffer in vain." Those words echoed in Elijah's mind during the darkest nights. Then came the Prussian. In February, a stout man with a thick accent and sharp eyes arrived at camp. He introduced himself as Baron von Steuben. No one knew what to make of him at first. His appearance was grand, with gleaming boots and a sword at his side, but Washington welcomed him. "He's to be our drill master," whispered Talbot. "Can you believe it? In this hell?" But soon the men realized what a gift the Baron was. Von Steuben had served in the armies of Europe, and though he spoke little English, he brought order to the chaos. Training began at dawn. In snow up to their knees, they drilled with muskets, learning to reload faster, to march in formation, to fight as a single force. Von Steuben's voice rang out over the valley, often through his translator, but sometimes in a mix of German curses and broken English that made the men laugh despite themselves. Elijah's body ached from the exercises, but each day he felt stronger, more prepared. The army that had stumbled into Valley Forge began to transform. No longer just farmers and tradesmen with muskets. They were becoming soldiers. Supplies slowly trickled in. Washington had pleaded with Congress and the states, and the quartermaster department had been reorganized under Nathaniel Greene. Coats, shoes, and food reached the camp, albeit in limited quantities. The worst of the starvation eased. One day in March, a crate of flour arrived. It was the first bread Elijah had tasted in months. He wept as he ate it. "Can't believe we're still standing," said Talbot that night, poking at their now sturdier fire. "We're not just standing," Elijah replied. "We're learning how to fight." Outside, snow was melting. Mud replaced the icy ground, and birds had returned to the trees. Spring was near. By April, word came that France had recognized American independence and agreed to aid their cause. The men erupted in cheers, and for the first time in months, the camp felt alive. It was more than a military alliance. It was proof that their suffering had meant something. On a clear day in May, Washington reviewed the troops. They marched in perfect lines, muskets gleaming, uniforms patched but proud. Von Steuben stood at the front, beaming like a father at his children. "You have become an army," he declared. And they had. Years later, Elijah Cartwright would sit by a hearth of his own, telling his grandchildren stories of the war. He would speak of battles, of Yorktown and victory, of freedom won, but always he would return to Valley Forge. More than any fight, he'd say, that winter made us who we were. We didn't win a battle there. We won ourselves. Across the land, those who survived Valley Forge carried its lessons with them. That liberty was worth the frostbite and hunger, that unity forged in fire would outlast the fiercest storm. The heart of a soldier was not measured in strength alone, but in endurance. They had endured. Because they had, a nation was born.